Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the July pre-agenda meeting for the Knox County Planning Commission. It's 11:31, so I thought we would go ahead and start the meeting. With that, I just wanted to go ahead and thank Tim Hill for the last 2 years of his service in the chair. I appreciate your help. And also, I just wanted to thank the other commissioners for the opportunity. I'm very humbled that you asked me to be your chair for this year. Thank you for that. Moving past that, I wanted to introduce our newest member, Margaret Butler, to the team, to the commission up here, and I'll turn it over to Margaret and let her give you a little bit of her background and her experience.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Thank you, John. Just want to tell everybody how happy I am to be here and appreciate the opportunity. I'm an architect with McCarty Holsapple McCarty, just next door. I've been in the field, this is getting hard to say, over 40 years. So I've been in architecture, and I've done some planning in my background as well, and I've been before this planning commission on a time or two, as well as others in the region. So I'm looking forward to it. Bear with me as I get my feet under myself, and I look forward to serving with you all. Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you very much. You'll be a welcome addition to the team. So with that, those informalities done, we'll just move on to Amy. Did you have any?
Yes, I just have a few staff activity updates to share with you all this morning. We have our facts and figures brochure that staff has been working on. It's in graphics and will be available for release soon. And so once we get that on our website, we'll be sure to share that out with the full commission. Our staff have also been working on a crash data dashboard, which is complete. It is being currently reviewed, and a summary report is being finalized. So we'll also have that report available to be posted online and share that with you as well. I did want to share a few fun, maybe not fun facts, but some highlights from that crash dashboard. So Sevierville so we do this for the region, so it's not just limited to the city of Knoxville and Knox County. Sevierville has the highest crash rate in the region per capita. 21 times more likely for pedestrian or bicyclist to be killed in a traffic crash compared to motorists, which probably makes a lot of sense to you all when you think about the vulnerability of our pedestrians and cyclists on the roads. Failure to yield is the most common crash factor. The most dangerous streets in the city of Knoxville for pedestrians and cyclists are some of our with the heaviest traffic. So Broadway, Chapman Highway, Cumberland Avenue, Kingston Pike, Magnolia, and Western. And our urban arterials comprise only 4% of our region's roadway miles, but they account for nearly 35% of all of our crashes. So we'll have some more detail for you all in the near future on those statistics. We completed another round of stakeholder engagement for the BREATHE project that we're working on with the city's Office of Sustainability. This will be our final round of sessions prior to the consultant drafting the comprehensive climate action plan. And staff, both the Transportation Planning Organization staff as well as city staff, have been attending events in the region throughout the spring and the summer to engage the public about this project specifically. Staff have begun work on our annual report. This is our first annual report for the county's comprehensive plan. We anticipate having a draft complete within the next 60 days. And I know I said at our last meeting that we would have a report or presentation on the development activity report, but given the length of our agenda, as you all can see in front of you, I've decided to postpone that. So we will have Aubrey come in and share the details of that report to you in August.
Thank you, Director Brooks. So we'll move on to our review list today. The first one we have is number 6, the city of Knoxville. I'm not sure who's speaking on this, if Cheryl is or...
It'd be Casey Krause.
Casey Krause, yes. Thank you.
All right, can you all hear me? All right, I'm Casey Krause. I'm the urban forester with the city of Knoxville. And I'm going to talk to you guys about our proposed changes in the landscape code. And before I go ahead and do that, go ahead, Jesse, next page. do that, I just want to give you guys a little bit of background of why we're here today and what got us to this point. So back in 2023, 2024, the city of Knoxville underwent a urban forest master plan planning session. It was a year-long process with an extensive amount of background public engagement processes that took place. We had public meetings, community groups, open houses, we had surveys, we had several workshops and many one-on-one interviews with many different stakeholders across the city. These stakeholders included landscape architects, designers, developers, folks from Planning Commission at the time, city and county staff, city council members, folks from neighborhoods, so on and so forth. It was a very extensive process where we essentially looked at our tree-related resources and wanted to see where we wanted to go in the next 20 to 30 years. Next page. So what we heard as it pertains to specifically the landscape code, when it came to design and professionals and project leads, one of the things we heard was that the current code, written as is that it was very rigid. There was a need for more flexibility within the code, and there was a demand for an individual within the city of Knoxville staff to be a green professional to help work with folks submitting plans through the through the approval process. From the public, some of the things we heard was we have a code in play, but oftentimes the landscape's installed incorrectly. It's not sustainable. We have issues still with invasive species and plants such as Bradford pears and burning bush being utilized. And there needs to be a need for incentives on preserving mature trees as well. We also heard from the public that there was a need for also a green professional to work with inside the city to help folks move this process along and ensure that the code essentially is sustainable moving forward. Go ahead, Jesse, next slide there. So moving forward, one of the first things that we're doing on our end is we are going to be moving forward to hiring a green industry professional at the city of Knoxville to essentially work with developers, designers, and folks who are working on trying to move their landscape plans through the current code as is. What this is going to do and what we propose this does moving forward is that it will help eliminate the need for alternative compliance. Second thing this individual will be there to help consult with project teams on their designs and be able to essentially speak the same language as designers, landscape architects on how to get their projects through the current code. And then finally, what this is going to do is allow for some flexibility in the code as well to allow certain things that were a little bit more rigid at the time to now be more flexible moving forward. And we'll go over some of those things here shortly. So what we're proposing in the changes in the landscape code is the big thing is probably the elimination of the committee review for alternative plans. This is something that this green industry professional can work through on this particular process. And what this is going to essentially do is it's going to eliminate the fee associated with alternative landscape review. And it's going to eliminate the long process for applications as well, and hopefully streamline the process for review. And then getting into the code itself, go ahead, Jesse, next slide, is trying to eliminate the things that are causing projects to go into alternative compliance to begin with. And these are some of the things I'm going to go through here now is what we have seen as the main things that have triggered this alternative compliance, and which really is the bulk of most of the changes that we're proposing. So first off is reduction in species diversity requirements. What we're proposing to do here is eliminate the species diversity requirement for shrubs and reduce the species requirement for trees. And the reason for this is the long-term investment in trees is more important and takes a lot more time as it pertains to shrubs. So for example, if you had a project that planted a monoculture of trees 20 to 30 years ago, and a pest, let's say they were all ash trees, and a pest, emerald ash borer, came in and wiped away that entire population, you have now lost 30 years of investment from that particular project. Same situation, let's say it's a shrub, you can get back that investment in a relatively short period of time by planting new shrubs, where you can't readily do so with trees. So what we also see with this is that by being more lax on our diversity requirements, it allows for more uniformity with the plan and the design, which is one thing we've heard a lot from our designers on aesthetics. It eases some of the design issues and allows for projects to buy in bulk, which then in turn kind of saves some money on the front end. One of the things we've looked at is being more flexible on the materials, specifically when we look at the understory of the landscaping. So for example, on our landscape islands, on what would now be acceptable is if you were looking to try and do something if you had some concerns about maintenance and the cost of maintenance, you could do something more traditional like you see in the picture on your left with grass and your more traditional mulch application. If maintenance and aesthetics are some things you're concerned about, you can kind of have the middle ground there and have mulch and or flowers and shrubs associated with it. And if aesthetics is something of concern and something that you want in your project, you can go do the full works and do what you see there on the right. All of these would be acceptable under the new code as proposed. More options on the facade as well. This was the number one thing that triggered a lot of alternative compliance that we have seen in the last couple of years. And really what it comes down to is our site landscape requirements that required shade trees to be planted in and around the vicinity of the front of buildings. And what we're doing is eliminating the language in there essentially says stuff about shade trees and just open it up for trees in general. So there the designer could look at that and say, oh, I could plant a Japanese maple, I could plant a columnar tree like you see in the middle, something that's going to be more appropriate for the space where these requirements come into play. We also are proposing that in these site landscaping requirements, if you're already required to have landscaping in the perimeter landscape yard or in the interior parking lot, that these would essentially count and work towards your site landscape requirements and not have to use and do those extensive plantings in and around the facade. One of the big things we heard about was tree preservation, and one of the areas we really see that this might be utilized and be useful is around the perimeter of properties. And so what we are allowing and what we propose to allow in this is essentially a 25-foot buffer. If you're able to preserve a 25-foot buffer in and around the property, that can constitute as your existing buffer. And this would have to be made up of native trees and shrubs, essentially. So it's an encouragement or an incentive, essentially, for folks to try and preserve trees, and that essentially would, in turn, would count as the buffer for a particular project. So just to kind of highlight this, really what it is by us bringing in a green professional on staff, we are essentially able to eliminate the need for alternative compliance. That's going to reduce fees. It's going to streamline the process. This individual also is going to be able to work with individuals on projects and specifics of the code to help streamline that process as well, to try and get folks from even having to go into alternative compliance to begin with. And then finally, we've really looked at those different items that have created folks or caused folks to try and move into alternative compliance and try to make those more rigid issues that were causing those things to occur more flexible, such as species diversity, the facade requirements, and optionals on materials as well. So that is all I have on my end, and I will open it up for questions from folks.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. My question is regarding the islands. I know you said there was 3 different options. One looks like it's pretty minimal, like grass or mulch. Is that just an option, just grass or mulch?
It's unlimited options, really. So it's not just those are the 3 options you have to go by. What we're essentially saying is that you need to landscape that area, but it's the options are up to the designer.
So I guess my concern is that they'll always take the least expensive option. Is there any incentive to get them to actually put plants and landscaping shrubs inside there as opposed to just leaving it as mulch or rocks or grass that's just going to become weeds?
Yeah, there's no incentives, but I have seen from a lot of the designs, in fact, what you're seeing there on a couple of those installations there are not required on the far middle and the right, are not required to begin with. So we do still see that oftentimes is that through the projects that folks do want to see more landscaping than just the plain grass, sod, mulch. So, but there is no incentives built into going down that route.
So you said there's no incentive now for them to do anything? When
There's
it comes
none-
to like those islands, especially like in the middle of a parking lot, or
No,
there's nothing now?
no.
Okay. Well, that's too bad. I hate to see just an empty bed that's just rock or mulch or it becomes weeds and not maintained,
The one thing I will say about having more flexibility, especially with like the shrub, one of the things we've seen is because of like the species diversity requirements and having extensive amount of different plant material, oftentimes what projects do is they hire a landscape company that comes in there, and they're oftentimes when you have a mixed array of different plant material down there, they're all maintained very similar, which if somebody like me who does gardening and things like that, there's certain plants that flower in spring, certain ones that flower in fall. They're all maintained in a very similar way, so where they all may be sheared off or pruned all at the same time, where you don't get the amenities that you were really looking for from the design. So that is one of the things that like sometimes having increased diversity does diminish some of the longevity of the material in the long run. Just some of my own observations.
Mr. Kraus, I've got, if you're done, Amy, are you done? Okay. So a point of clarification too. So this is just on the increased flexibility is just on the code as it is, is that accurate? Because I know we had, Ms. Ball, myself, had some discussions as part of it. On the alternative side, there's going to be a requirement for, and this gets back to Amy, I think maybe some of what your concern could be alleviated by. There's going to be a requirement for a landscape architect to sign off on that, and I think that might help a little bit with what you were talking about. If there's a landscape architect involved, I think they're not just going to probably plant grass in that. I mean, they'll have a full design for the whole thing now, but that's on the alternative.
Yeah, that's on the
landscape
alternative
designs. It's not on
Correct.
the, to not address your concern, it's not on the regular requirements, but if they did choose to go to an alternative side, landscaping, it would have to be designed, so it would have a landscape architect stamp on it if it were an alternative design. But talking about the same thing, but 2 different avenues of what's allowed under the code and what would be an alternative design for that. Just clarifying that. All right. If there's no other questions about that case number, we'll move on to number 28. This is another City of Knoxville. Mr. Reel, I believe, is going to present.
Good morning. Mark Reel, City of Knoxville Zoning Chief, speaking on behalf of Peter Aarons, the zoning administrator for this case. This is a alternative compliance review. It's a level 3 for the south waterfront. These don't come up often very much, so I'm going to answer any questions that you have. I also have Curtis Williams from engineering to speak on it because it is a little bit of a unique site. in that it only has one principal frontage, but the applicant is looking to develop a 6-unit townhouse development on this site. And per the South Waterfront SW2 Form-Based Code District, driveways are not permitted on the principal frontage. And that's fine. Yeah, driveways are not allowed on the principal frontage, and that being that the property only fronts one street, a driveway to the development cannot be constructed to serve vehicular access to this property. There is no minimum parking in the South Waterfront District, and so in theory, parking would have to be either on street or located across Foggy Bottom there, where there is some public parking for the park. And I know last time that one of these came up, which, like I said, I think there's only been 3 in the last 3 years. We didn't have a recommendation for the last one until the day of the agenda review, and so this time we've come up with a recommendation for this one. And it is the administrator's recommendation that the driveway does not meet the requirements of the SW2 district, and because off-street parking is not required for residential developments, the request should not be approved as proposed. And then I believe Curtis might be able to speak a little bit about the property next to it, as it is a city-owned property, Foggy Bottom there, and there is a part of Lot 8 that is also city-owned.
It's still morning, so good morning. So it's a little bit unique. It's a unique scenario here. So the city owns the property in this particular location in fee, including the right-of-way. Normally, when a right-of-way is placed, it's not owned by the city. It's just an area for the city to be able to use and manage for the public benefit. In this particular instance, the city obtained the property for the park and this particular strip of property, which was access to that area. They bought that, purchased it just like anyone would purchase private property. So they obtained the rights to it through fee ownership. So the city placed a right-of-way across their fee-owned property to create the right-of-way for Foggy Bottoms and then the road along the park area there. And so it left a little remnant strip of city-owned property between the edge of right-of-way and between this particular property that we're talking about. So that's kind of how this unfolded. It's a little bit different. Normally the city doesn't own the fee of property, especially in the right-of-way, but this is a little bit unique in this area.
So how wide is that strip? Do you know, roughly?
I think it varies in width, and I don't know exactly. I would guess probably 20 feet.
Yeah, the only thing that came to mind to me, and I'm totally speaking off the cuff, would the city consider allowing some parking there?
Allowing parking on city property?
Yeah, I mean, converting it into some sort of parking. I mean, you're effectively saying we're not going to allow parking. It's going to be on street, that type of thing. Is that even a thought or an option? Or
The use of parking along the right-of-way I don't think that would necessarily, I don't know if we would be open to that with the current street project that we have in that area. It's already kind of been designed and laid out. It's something we could talk about. I don't think that we've talked about that internally. We obviously have parking on street just around the corner
Right.
in the park area there. So it's not unusual to have on-street parking. It would just be, if it is on-street parking, it would be just open to the public. So
Sure,
it'd be
yeah.
public spaces available for anyone to use.
yeah, that's just curious. Thank you.
Yep.
Regarding the parking, there's a lot of stress in that area right now because of the project that's happening. So, I mean, we know that. But the public parking that is there for the park, there's a lagoon that's close to the shelter, and then there's strip parking further down Suttree. But are you all suggesting that this property should be using that as its parking solution?
Not necessarily, I'm not necessarily saying that, I'm just trying to explain why there's a weird remnant piece of city property between this property and the right-of-way. Technically, that whole area of land there, including the right-of-way, is just city-owned property at the moment.
Okay.
My question is, if this wasn't a weird property and you did have kind of normal abutment of the property line against the right-of-way, and the developer had proposed a, driveway coming off, I guess, Foggy Bottom, like, would there be an issue like in that scenario, or would that be tolerable from the city's perspective?
I can't speak to the zoning piece, Mark can.
Yeah, so if it did have frontage along Foggy Bottom, if that parcel was not there, we would consider that part of the principal frontage for the property, and so a driveway off of Phillips would be allowed. Or if Phillips was still the primary and they had a driveway off of Foggy Bottom, as long as it was not the principal frontage, they would be allowed to have a driveway.
Okay, and I guess I'm just struggling because it seems like we don't actually have an issue with what's being proposed here. It's just that the issue is that there's this weird piece of property that's preventing what would normally occur from maybe occurring, and so
Correct.
I'm empathizing with the developer here, I guess.
Correct. It's just the way the code is written, and therefore we have to abide by what the code says.
Okay.
So is there an opportunity for, excuse me, the developer to ask for a variance to this, or?
So the way the ordinance is written, it's not permitted, and because it's not permitted, this was their alternative route, was to come before Planning Commission through the Level 3 Alternative Compliance Review to ask for that allowance.
So this is the variance request, effectively?
Correct. It's not able to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Very good, thank you.
Could the developer buy this piece of property from the city?
I think they could certainly ask that.
Would that be the solution?
Or,
It would give them, if they owned the property up to the right-of-way, they would have frontage on Foggy Bottoms at that point.
Thank you.
or this body, and correct me if I'm wrong, this body could approve it and allow it to happen, correct?
You could approve the Level 3 Alternative Compliance Review and allow the driveway to be on that principal frontage, correct, without needing to purchase that property.
Right, very good, thank you.
I got a couple of questions. Does the inability to use this as it stands with the principal frontage and parking issue, does that make the development just completely impossible, or it makes the particular design that's been proposed not possible?
It makes the design utilizes a garage for every unit at the base, and then it's a podium above that, and they would have to go back through and revise the plans to not have a garage, because theoretically they would not be able to get vehicular access to the property.
So it's not that the development itself is being denied, it's that the current articulation of the development isn't functioning inside the code that's been established.
Correct.
But again, as Planning Commission, we can look at it, and I think we could make a decision that what makes sense and doesn't make sense. I mean, you've got a remnant piece left over from the city that's not being used by the city. It is what it is. I get what you're saying. There's technically no frontage, excuse me, there, which is triggering this. But that small 20-foot, 10-foot wide parcel is never going to get used for anything, I don't think. But we can discuss it further at the meeting. I don't want to get into deliberation. Yes, Commissioner Gill.
I just wanted to follow up with Commissioner Midas's question. So, if I'm understanding correctly, what she's asking is could they rearrange this particular development and satisfy their needs? It's just this particular thing. But from what I'm looking at, there's just no vehicular access allowed at this property regardless of what they do. They could put a single-family house on this, and they still wouldn't be allowed to have a driveway. Is that correct?
That is correct. As the way it sits, it doesn't have any other frontages on any other streets, and so any type of vehicular access to this would not be allowed, so there would be no driveway permitted on this lot in any configuration, regardless of the use.
So, thank you. I'm like, I think what they said is that there's not a driveway possible, but it's also not required because there's not a minimum parking. So,
Yes, I guess I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on the idea that it's not their design that is triggering this. This is just the situation based on the lot itself. You can develop something there, but whatever you develop there will never have vehicular access. So no matter what gets put there, if something gets put there, they will be using city-owned park access to park, because let's be realistic, they're going to go park over there in the park, and then people who want to come to enjoy that.
Or the
their kids-
street.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
the street. Is there street parking on that? Is there street parking allowed on Foggy Bottom or Phillips? I don't think there is there?
there's residential parking in that area, on-street residential parking. The answer about Foggy Bottoms is a little bit, I think the reason that they're not sure is because there's so much construction going on right there at the moment that, not sure that's.
I know that it's on the landing near Suttree Landing, but is there anything actually?
You're talking about like parallel parking on the street?
Yeah, I don't think you can parallel. I can't think you can. Phillips and
Right.
Foggy Bottom don't allow.
Yeah, I
So
don't.
there's, you can see cars
There's
parked there
residential there.
Okay,
in the area.
that's what I was curious about.
Unless it's prohibited, folks can park there as far as I know.
Yeah.
Commissioner Adams, did you have any more
I'll hold it.
questions? Mr. Anderson?
So this may have already been addressed, but on the plat for this, there's a strip between Lot 8 and this lot that says public right-of-way to remain.
Closed alley. There was an existing alley there that got closed. If we can turn on the ward map, we'll be able to see that. But I think it was fairly recently closed. So 2014, that alley was closed. And so the adjacent property owners received half of that alley. So the city's parcel received half of that space, and this parcel received half of that space. And so that's why their property line is now kind of in the center of that old alley. If that alley had not been closed and it were open, I think we wouldn't have to have this conversation, if I'm not mistaken, because they would have access off of an alley at that point.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's, this is just a question, but, if it says on the plat that it's to remain, how did it get approved to be closed? Did this body approve that?
In 2014, closures would have been going through planning and city council.
They get approved by city council. So, and they come up fairly regularly.
That plat is really old, and so they weren't doing anything with that public right-of-way at that time. But that doesn't mean that it will be there forever in perpetuity.
Can I ask another question? Has there been any either encouragement, this is kind of following up on Commissioner Levinson's comment, but has there been any encouragement to the developer to consider that property with the city, or have they already inquired about trying to purchase that strip?
I think they've started discussions about it, but I don't think they've made any sort of formal application or any maybe sort of formal sit down with the city regarding it.
Because we've only seen a few of these, I just want to share with you all the, obviously, you all you can approve, you can deny it, you can add conditions to it, but you can also send it back for additional consideration as well. And ask these questions of the of the property or the developer.
Very good. Seeing no other questions, we can move on to item number 7. Jesse Hillman. Jesse.
All right, so this is an ordinance amendment for a new single-family attached dwelling use. It was brought to staff's attention that the existing two-family dwelling use or duplex in the code does not allow for subdivision along the party wall line because of required setbacks. The ability to subdivide side-by-side duplexes in this way promotes homeownership because it does allow each unit to be sold individually with its own lot. Technically, one can sell individual units on a shared lot, but it requires a condo-type regime and can be more difficult to execute. Staff researched other jurisdictions and found that it's common to have a use that allows for this kind of subdivision, and it's a use that's distinct from duplexes and townhouses. We also learned that this use existed in Knoxville's zoning code up until it was updated in 2020 with the term attached house. So this would be a return to a housing form that was permitted for many decades locally. Creating a new use required changes to many sections of the code, so I'll summarize these quickly. The new definition for a single-family attached dwelling is a structure containing one unit attached at an interior lot line by a vertical party wall to another unit. It clarifies that it is not a townhouse. We also amended the two-family dwelling definition to specify that it is a duplex on one lot. That is already how the setbacks require it to be, so this was just clarification. We amended the rules of measurement to clarify how side setbacks apply to this new dwelling type, and we added the new term to all applicable purpose statements of the residential districts. For residential dimensional standards, we halved the lot width and area standards for duplexes, since this is essentially a duplex that is subdivided in half. All other standards for height, setback, and lot coverage reflect what's permitted for single-family and duplex uses. We also added this new dwelling to the pocket neighborhood design standards. We added single-family attached to the use matrix in the same way that the two-family dwelling is permitted, so it would receive special use review in RN1 and RN2, just like a duplex. We also added this use to the principal use design standards for a duplex, so that quality criteria applies there as well. We made some minor modifications to the design standards so that a front-loaded garage has to be proportional to the front facade of a single-family attached dwelling. And we added a provision for both uses that the alley should be the primary access point where feasible. This use is exempt from an exterior lighting plan, just like single-family and duplex dwellings are. We added this use to the off-street parking standards with a modification that allows consideration of a shared driveway along the subdividing line so that you don't necessarily have to have two driveways. And this is an effort to reduce curb cuts and impervious impact. Minimum parking spaces, parking design, width, and bike parking all reflect what's required for single-family and duplex uses. The zoning code has purpose statements, and one of those is to provide for a diversity of housing types. Reestablishing this dwelling form that was lost in 2020 accomplishes this, and it increases homeownership opportunity. It would be regulated very similarly to duplexes with special use consideration and design standards, and for these reasons, staff recommend approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, first off, great job on evaluating the attached housing. I've seen this issue before. It's really left over from the 2008 financial crisis, I think, back when everybody used to develop condominiums on one lot. Then unfortunately, they went through a lot of foreclosure processes and things like that. And when the banks came in, they were having trouble getting clear title on those condominiums. So hence, the banks all stopped loaning on condominiums. They just locked it down, won't do it, which is a barrier to entry for affordable housing in our missing middle. So I think this is a great opportunity and a good way to address it, where now we have a lot line in the city in R1, R2, R3, any of them that allow that, so we can effectively build an attached home there. So that's great. I think it's a good step in the right direction. So thank you for that. And I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I just want to reiterate, I'm excited about this new on-ramp for ownership. I think that it makes a lot of sense and helps with affordability. So, yeah.
Agreed. Yes. Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah, I would echo that. I just have one clarification just kind of for myself. So we, like, as it stands, was it not true that you could build a duplex and then I think it's called like HPR in Tennessee law? I don't deal with that, but like, that's the word I know. Where you could split the lot already on a duplex that we already have. Like before this, you could build a duplex and split it, right, on the lot line? Or am I wrong on that?
No, we couldn't.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure.
because of setback standards and just the way it functioned, it was one lot and 2 units.
And two, I mean, I'd like to actually see something like this in the county side too, maybe when we come into the UDO, because we've run into some of that issue, and I think in RA, where we have a duplex, but now banking won't allow each side to be purchased, so maybe we can pick that up in the Unified Development Ordinance. Thank you again, Jesse, so we'll move on to number 27. I'm sorry,
just
Biggs.
quick question, maybe a silly one, but so say you have a duplex, you subdivide the lot, so you have kind of 2 segmented units. Could like the owner of, one of the duplexes at that point, if they choose to like demolish their duplex and like tear it down, like what could they build back there?
Yeah, so we did think through that. And there are going to be separate non-conforming lot changes. I would think that because it was subdivided in that way, it would be a lot of record that is not non-conforming. It is conforming with a specific use that would have to be, that's what it was permitted for. Mm-hmm. So I think it would have to be rebuilt as a single unit, single family attached.
Okay, yeah, you can just build a townhouse or something back necessarily. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify Commissioner Overton's comment that HPR would be the horizontal property regime, and that's a condo. So you could have done that, but it doesn't create 2 lots.
Right, yeah. Individual ownership of each unit, but a shared lot. Yeah.
Very good. Well, we will move on to agenda item number 27.
This is the plan development proposal for now 620-unit residential development called Cardinal Place on 2 parcels that comprise approximately 31.34 acres. The subject property abuts Williams Creek Golf Course with primary access on Delrose Drive. 13 exceptions from the property's RN4 and RN1 zoning districts were requested to permit the proposed development. As a refresher, the PD process permits exceptions from the zoning code to provide more flexibility for architecturally and environmentally innovative projects that align with our adopted plans. This is if and only if those applications provide adequate amenities and benefits to the city and surrounding neighborhood. These are the criteria for evaluating a planned development, the first of which is ensuring that a project is consistent with the purpose of a planned development. We also consider whether it would be injurious, affect orderly development, is supported by adequate infrastructure, is designed to minimize traffic impacts, and if it's compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. This case was postponed 60 days in May to allow time for feedback from commissioners to be incorporated. Recommendations by the Planning Commission included consolidating the public recreational amenities so that they were clearly distinguished from private amenities, moving the public park space closer to Delrose Drive to be more visible and welcoming, providing a maintenance agreement to ensure the public recreational components are independently maintained in perpetuity for public use, reducing the number of parking spaces, and reducing the scale and height of the residential development to be more compatible with the surrounding residential context. In response to these comments, the applicant redesigned the public amenities into a cluster of park space that includes 6 pickleball courts, a dog park, a playground, community gardens, and a natural park. The public parks now have their own dedicated parking lot that provides bike parking, a bike repair station, and EV charging stations. This park space has been moved closer to Delrose Drive, just past a reduced and vegetated stormwater management area, and a rendering has been included on page 7 of their packet to show how the park area would appear from the street. The ratio of townhouse to multifamily dwellings was adjusted so that townhouses increased from 80 to 140 units, and apartments decreased from 570 to 480 units, with a total unit reduction from 650 to 620. Parking spaces were reduced from 981 to 893, which is still 144 over what would be required if considering their proximity to transit. Another change to the design is the removal of vehicular access to Riverside Road, which is a local residential street with approximately 17 feet of pavement width. This is now a pedestrian access point similar to the Brooks Avenue access. The plan package notes that the recreational amenities will be privately maintained, but it provides no further detail or assurance on a maintenance agreement. This development proposal includes 13 requested exceptions from the RN4 and RN1 zoning districts. In general, these requests would facilitate development that's more aligned with what is allowed in the RN6 district, which is much more intensive than the surrounding RN1 and RN2 neighborhoods. As we've discussed, this property came before you in 2024 with a rezoning request from RN1 to RN6. Staff, this body, and City Council determined that RN4 was more appropriate because it balanced residential assets of the area with the wooded and larger lot surroundings and the substandard street infrastructure. The applicant then came back with this planned development, which would all be permitted by right in RN6. This context is an important aspect of staff's rationale. This is the alternative scenario of what the applicant claims they would be forced to pursue if they followed the RN4 standards. It takes issue with RN4's maximum lot area of 40,000 square feet for the multifamily use, and it shows the amount of subdivision that would be required if the quantity of units the applicant desires were pursued in this way exclusively. The applicant claims that they would have to reduce green space, decrease connectivity, increase hardscape with more runoff, design a more car-centric layout, and have limited or no common space, and waste construction materials on more inefficient buildings. Staff maintain that this is an unrealistic alternative because it would never be permitted. A multifamily development of this scale would have to come through special use review, and staff would recommend denial. Many of the listed benefits of the Cardinal Place development rely on this harsh alternative in order to make their cases a benefit. The planned development proposal enumerates 21 benefits that are categorized in 3 themes: community and recreation, environmental and preservation, and infrastructure access and mobility. Within the community and recreation category, the applicant lists the following amenities: a playground, a natural park, a dog park, a community garden, 6 pickleball courts, walking paths, and they also present the use of individually sold townhouse units located around the perimeter as a benefit because it provides transitional density. Staff maintain that the walking path provides a recreational amenity for its residents, but it does not currently improve connectivity to any place except within the development itself. The only pedestrian access point that connects to existing sidewalk is the Brooks Avenue entrance, and it is located about as far as it can be from the public park space. The development of market rate townhouses does not merit further consideration as a public benefit, and it's already attainable in RN4. Similarly, a transition of residential intensity is not a public benefit and would not exist without the extent of multifamily development proposed. Most importantly, the plan package provides little detail on how these recreational aspects would be physically or financially maintained for public use. Should membership fees be charged, this would become more of a commercial enterprise than a public benefit. Without a binding maintenance plan as requested by the Planning Commission, there is no way to ensure any of these amenities function in a way that supports or promotes their use by the public, and the city has no intention of maintaining these recreational areas for the developer. The applicant credits the site design with several environmental benefits: green courtyard space, more building efficiency with more units per building. At least 75% of the building footprint would have white roofs, preservation of approximately 3.5 acres of existing tree and rock outcroppings, which is a decrease from 4.27 acres in the prior version. Strategically retaining trees to the extent that it's feasible on 3.5 acres, and a 35-foot natural buffer between this property and adjacent residences. Staff's analysis is that many of these benefits rely on the argument that development under RN4 would necessarily be more impervious, auto-centric, discouraging of green space, and resulting in less efficient buildings. While the RN4 dimensional standards are not intended for the scale and massing of apartments proposed, That doesn't mean the zoning district hampers conservation or sustainable building design. To the contrary, RN4 promotes green space with the pocket neighborhood standards, and it has impervious caps. Additionally, the density of residential buildings themselves should not be considered a public benefit, as they represent more units and therefore more profit for the development. While the developer claims they will preserve approximately 3.5 acres, they're also proposing 144 more parking spaces than required, and they are requesting an increase in impervious surface from 40% to 70% in the RN1 zone portion of the site. With the proposed 3.5 acres of strategic tree removal and retention, there's no assurance regarding the quantity of trees that would be preserved, and it's possible that no trees would be considered viable in those areas, especially considering the intensity of development surrounding those areas. This critique also applies to the noted reforestation benefit, as there's no quantifiable measure provided to verify tree plantings would occur. Some level of reforestation would likely be required per the tree protection ordinance. This is a greenfield development that's entirely comprised of mature forest. The city of Knoxville recently adopted the Urban Forest Master Plan, which sets a goal to increase the city's tree canopy from 38% to 40% by 2040. This context runs counter to the argument that these zoning exceptions are necessary for the sake of environmental conservation. In the infrastructure, access, and mobility theme, multimodal connectivity and accessibility are emphasized. Walking paths are mentioned again as a mobility benefit because they connect to existing sidewalk on Brooks Avenue. It lists parking spaces for the public park, installation of the bike repair station, covered bike parking, EV charging stations throughout the development. They also mention how 2% of the residential units would be made accessible, meaning these homes would be designed for wheelchair access and usability. And an additional 8% of the units would be Type A units, which include features for potential future accessibility needs. The minimum requirement by law is that 2% of the dwellings be Type A. They also list access and signage for the Williams Masterson Cemetery, which is a small private family cemetery adjacent to the proposed development. Walking paths connect Brooks Avenue, Riverside Road, and Delrose Drive, yet there's only existing sidewalk on the north side of Brooks Avenue, which would require a mid-block crosswalk to connect. Parking spaces for community use of the park areas are listed as a voluntary benefit, though if these amenities are deemed to be public parks, adequate parking would be required. The EV charging and bike repair stations would be most convenient for future residents of Cardinal Place, not the general public. The provision of more accessible and Type A units than is required provides for a more inclusive environment, but it's also an aspect of the development that could be accomplished through RN4. Providing internal pedestrian access to a private family cemetery containing 6 graves is of unknown benefit to the city. The family cemetery has no historic designations. The first sentence of the plan development article states that exceptions from the zoning should only be applied to projects that provide compensating amenities and benefits to the city and neighborhood. The city's stance, as detailed in this letter from Knoxville's Urban Design and Development team, is that the listed amenities do not provide substantial public benefit, warranting the requested exceptions from the zoning code. Without the city's endorsement of these benefits to the city, this application does not meet the intent of the plan development process. Last year, the applicant requested RN6 for most of the site, but accepted the zoning recommendation by staff of RN4, and this is what was approved. The plan development pursues a design that would be permitted by right in RN6. Thus, this application appears to utilize the plan development process to contractually rezone the property and circumvent a land use decision made by the Planning Commission and City Council. This compromises the integrity of the plan development process, and it's counter to the first standard for zoning exceptions to be granted, which is that it improves the overall merit of the PD. If this project is approved when the city administration has determined the benefits are inadequate, it could set a precedent that leads to the plan development process being utilized as an alternative means for obtaining more intensity after being denied a rezoning by City Council or a zoning variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Staff recommend denying the plan development because it does not provide adequate benefits to the city for the degree of zoning exceptions requested, as determined by the city. The applicant's argument that RN4 necessitates poor design or fewer amenities is false. The planned development pursues an RN6 style development when that zone was intentionally not approved at this location because it was deemed incompatible with the surrounding area. And these are the primary reasons why staff recommend denial.
Well, okay, that was a lot of information. Thank you for that. Is there, Commissioner Biggs, did you have a question?
Oh, I didn't mean to jump in front of you.
No, you're fine.
I was just going to ask, do we have an idea of like what would be considered adequate? I know that letter said there's not enough public benefit, and I know there's maybe some disagreement with the developer and city on EV charging locations, connectivity of pathways. Like, I guess how do we think about what is adequate? Is like if all the pathways did connect in a more harmonious way, would that be adequate? If there were 5 more EV charging stations at the park, that would be adequate. I'm just struggling with how to think about this, because I do think, while I think we can go back and forth on like how you could improve the layout to make it more publicly beneficial, like there are a lot of good things in there, and just I'm struggling with like what's good enough. Because and sorry, last question, and I think I asked this last time, but the number of units proposed is still compliant with like the RN4 density, right? There's not like an increased density request.
One of the, if you look at multifamily units and only consider that, then yes. But one of the exceptions they requested was a reduction in the minimum lot area for the townhouse use. That's number 3. So they are requesting, I guess, more density than would be.
But I guess total units proposed isn't greater than what they could build as of right under RN4 in that area. Is that right?
If the entire area was zoned RN4 and it was all developed under multifamily, not townhouse, they would be within the unit count.
That's helpful. All right. So, sorry, that was 2 questions. I guess, yeah, maybe back to my first question of just like, how do we think about what is enough?
I think that's a tricky question. I'll go back to the approval standards. The purpose of a planned development is to provide flexibility for innovative projects that are not attainable within the zoning code, and that those that innovative plan provides benefits to the city. This is a situation where an applicant requested RN6, was denied RN6, pursued RN6 through this process in exchange for kind of contractual, like, we'll give you this if you give us this, and that could be one interpretation of PD, but it's not the interpretation that we're standing by in this recommendation.
So I don't want this to come across as any sort of deliberation, but I guess what my understanding of this is that I guess 60 days ago at the meeting, we gave them suggestions on what they could do that then we would approve. And I'm guessing from staff report, and I'm not knocking staff's report, that staff didn't necessarily agree with the recommendations that we made as something that would pass muster with staff. But nonetheless, we made those recommendations, and it appears as though they listened to all of them except for maybe one. And so my question is, because I get staff's analysis, and it does frustrate me that we don't have a clear set of parameters that we can say, do this, 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 and this. But it seems like that's what we're supposed to do, is tell them as a commission what they should do, and if they do it, then that should be good enough. Am I thinking about this right? This is a discussion, so.
I was just going to say, that's a discussion that you all should have amongst yourselves. And once, they are coming before this body and you all can make your own recommendation. Again, our staff is just a recommendation and you all can take what you wish from that and then move forward with your own decision.
Amy, did you have a question?
Jesse, and I can tell Ms. Ball's here. Can you kind of talk about, I know it's been a while since I've been involved in a plan development for the city. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about how city's relationship in approving these developments is utilized? I mean, it sounds like, I know one time I dealt with one, and I was not on commission, but it was for affordable housing. And the city was very instrumental in working with the developer to make it work so that it was a benefit to the city. That's a big component on the approval process. Does that make sense?
I can speak to that. So there have been approximately 5, I believe, that have been contemplated, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong on those numbers. But yes, the plan developments, it's new. It was introduced as part of the update to the city zoning code. So we haven't seen a lot of them, but most of them have originated with conversations that have happened with a city official and a city department. You mentioned that there was the VMC project on Fifth Avenue. That was, I think, originated. That was the first one that we actually saw come through the process. Obviously, the stadium project, very unique, large scale, originated with conversations that started at the administration level before they came into, okay, what kind of zoning do we need to make this actually happen? What kind of process do we need to undertake? So they've kind of taken different paths. The city has a public-private partnership team that we relied on to review this particular project with, and then going forward, that is the team that will be utilized to look at plan development projects, and that is made up with a number of different representatives from departments across the city, as well as KCDC and our staff.
It's a tool that has been used by the city in conjunction with the developer, in close connection with them to make it happen. Is that correct?
Typically, again, we have a very small sample size, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question from a newbie here. As you point out, that group that would be working with the developer, has there been that discussion with the developer, or they just brought this to the commission and gotten the feedback that you got to rezone to RN4? And what I'm guessing is there are a lot more exceptions than what was anticipated there would be when that was suggested, and they did the plan development, which was a little bit of a sidestep. Is that what happened?
Yes, there have been a number of conversations. I don't want to speak on behalf of the developer, the applicant. I think that's a good question for them as well, all the conversations they've had, because we've not necessarily been party to all those. We've had multiple conversations with them over the past 9 months or longer than that, as well as they've had individual conversations with city officials, and then we've had a joint meeting with the applicant and the property owner and representatives from the city administration.
Ms. Perez, you had your light on earlier. Did you have a question?
Well, it was more about the master plan that you mentioned, Jesse, if there was any connection between the city and the developer in the maintenance plan, if that would assist in facilitating an approval.
In the maintenance plan?
Yeah.
The city's expressed that they would not be maintaining these amenities for the developer. And in the packet, there's only very brief mention of a maintenance plan as something that it would be privately maintained, but whether there's membership fees for that, what that would look like, whether that would be more of a commercial enterprise or actually a public park type space is unclear.
Okay, if it was deemed that it was just open to the public and that the developer or the HOA or however they decide, it's not an enterprise, and it's a public benefit, would that assist in any way? Or would that change the opinion in any way?
Staff evaluated what was presented. So I would, at this point, if there are negotiations at Planning Commission, that would be your determination.
Thank you.
Amy, you still have?
Just to clarify, I know you read out all of the different things that Planning Commission a couple of months ago asked to have addressed in the revisions. And if I'm not mistaken, one of those was to address the concern around height of the structures. And I'm looking at the plan that's posted online, and there've been many, so I just want to make sure that I'm correct, that did not change. Like, they're still proposing the more excessive height for this development.
Yes, they maintained the request for an increase in the maximum height from 45 feet to 65 feet. They did reduce the number of apartment buildings from 6 to 5.
But the height has remained the same.
But the height remains the same.
I think it's difficult for that to come across, the height of these on the plan that's in front of us because of the way it's presented. So I'm just bringing that up now because I think it's an important detail that is a big detail.
I guess maybe just a follow-up question to that. So when we're saying, you know, they applied, or they received RN4, their current application has characteristics of RN6. Is it really only kind of number 4 and 5 up there that I guess are more akin to RN6 from staff's perspective?
That's correct.
Okay. And I guess, yeah, all right. So they're going for 13, but only 2 of them are sort of what we would consider RN6 related. Is that fair?
It's hard to put it in those terms.
Okay.
I think the removal of the 40,000 square foot maximum lot area for multifamily is pretty major as well. That's a distinct RN4 limit on multifamily extent. What we say in the report is that this would all be permitted by right in RN6.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they postponed this morning.
The new guy had it on mute. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so moving on to number 44. I'm sure, jumping back, I'm sure there'll be a lot of good deliberation on item.
They're going to reverse these permits.
Right. So I was going to say number 44 is going to request postponement. So we are going to not hear that one from Whitney today. So we are going to move on to number 19 with Kelly Bousquet.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. This is item 19, case number 7-J25RZ, 7-D25PA, and 7-D25SP. This is a city rezoning and plan amendment request to go from RN2 single-family residential neighborhood and low-density residential to neighborhood commercial zoning district and neighborhood commercial land use classification. The hillside protection overlay would be retained. Development trends along the section of Sevier Avenue where the subject property is located have not significantly changed since the 2011 South City Sector Plan was adopted and has remained primarily residential. In contrast, there has been an increase in commercial and mixed-use development focused on the northwest and southeast sections of Sevier Avenue. Significant changing conditions in this area include the Sevier Avenue roadway project underway to the northwest of the subject property, which will add a roundabout at the Sevier Avenue and Island Home intersection, as well as new ADA compliance, sidewalks, streetlights, and traffic signals. The Sevier Avenue utility and conduit project will run concurrently with the roadway project and relocate all overhead utilities to underground conduits and duct banks. And just for clarification, the streetscape project will kind of stay near the section of Sevier Avenue to the northeast, whereas the orange highlighted in front of the subject property are those utility and duct banks upgrades. So while there are significant infrastructure improvements going on in the area, they do not necessarily make non-residential development at this location more feasible. Looking more closely at the map, you can see that the subject property is along a section of Sevier Avenue that is tucked away from the mix of uses to the northwest and southeast, and is part of an established entryway into a residential neighborhood. Staff recommendation is to deny the neighborhood commercial land use classification and zoning districts. The CN zoning district is intended to provide for an environment of integrated residential development and small scale and commercial uses. Though the CN district is typically compatible with the residential area, the zoning district is not appropriate at this location, as it would be a non-residential district encroaching into an established neighborhood that is separated from the wide mix of uses to the northwest and southeast. The subject property's small lot size and unique layout could also make meeting all applicable design standards and parking requirements challenging, as the CN district requires additional design standards for non-residential developments abutting single-family residential zoning districts, such as increased setbacks, decreased building height, and additional noise and lighting requirements. Additionally, the location criteria for the neighborhood commercial land use classification states that no new neighborhood commercial should be zoned for or developed within a half mile of existing commercial development that features sales of day-to-day goods and services. The subject property does not meet this criterion, as it is part of an isolated area from other commercial and mixed-use developments. For these reasons, staff is recommending denial of the neighborhood commercial land use classification and zoning districts because it would be an encroachment of a residential land use class in a residential area and does not meet all of the criteria for a rezoning. Are there any questions?
Seeing no questions on item number 19, we will move on to number 22.
All right. This is case 7-P25RZ and 7-E25PA and SP. It is a city rezoning and plan amendment request. This request is to rezone a 13,000 square foot lot in the Fort Sanders neighborhood from RN5 general residential neighborhood to industrial mixed use and amend the one-year plan and central city sector plan from the Fort Sanders neighborhood mixed use special district MUCC 17 to the Fort Sanders neighborhood mixed use special district MUCC 16. Development trends in the surrounding area have primarily been residential with a mix of office and commercial uses interspersed throughout. Commercial development and larger multifamily complexes have primarily been constructed along Grand Avenue to the north and around the outer periphery of the Fort Sanders neighborhood, whereas interior development has largely consisted of townhouses and small and medium-scale multifamily dwellings, as well as office and small-scale commercial uses. The Fort Sanders Medical Hospital, which was expanded in 2021, and the University of Tennessee campus, which has experienced a significant increase in student enrollment, is within a half mile to the south, and core downtown Knoxville is within a mile to the east. The requested MUCC special district is meant to allow higher densities outside of the neighborhood's historic core. This land use classification runs along Grand Avenue from the east to west until South 21st Street, where it dips down to encompass Forest Avenue as well. The MUCC 16 land use class recognizes that there has historically been a broad mix of uses along Grand Avenue, including office, wholesale, warehouse distribution, and retail, which is recommended to continue. The subject property's current MUCC 17 special district consists of properties on the north side of Forest Avenue between 21st Street and 18th Street. The land use classification is specifically placed and is only a half block deep in this location, as it is intended to be a transitional area between the variety of uses along Grand Avenue and the Fort Sanders Hospital to the south. Staff recommendation is to deny the MUCC 16 Fort Sanders Neighborhood Mixed Use Special District because it does not meet the criteria for a plan amendment. Both the MUCC 16 and MUCC 17 special districts support the medium density residential and high density residential land use classifications. However, the primary difference between the two special districts is that MUCC 16 supports the business park type 2 land use class, which allows more intensive uses, including light manufacturing and warehouse and distribution centers, among others. Development trends in this area have been heavily residential, and the hospital's expansion, increasing student population, and proximity to downtown highlight the need to support residential and community serving amenities in this area, which can already be achieved under the current land use designation. Furthermore, changing the land use classification at the site would bisect the MUCC 17 special district, which could disrupt the established development pattern and transition in land use intensity along Forest Avenue. Since the late 1990s, zoning south of Grand Avenue has transitioned from industrial to residential zoning, as well as office zoning and institutional zoning, which has largely been concentrated near the hospital and university. Though IMU at this location would be a minor extension of the district, the neighboring properties on the east and west sides have historically been residential and are currently a new multifamily complex and townhouse development. Staff recommendation is to deny the industrial mixed-use zoning district because it does not meet the criteria for rezoning. The IMU zoning district is intended to provide a mix of light industrial and a variety of compatible commercial uses such as entertainment, amusement, and retail establishments. This mix is designed to promote the reuse of older, character-giving structures that may no longer be suitable for their original industrial purposes, but can accommodate various alternative types of uses. The subject property does not meet the description of the IMU district, as it historically functioned as a residential use until 2023, when the single-family dwelling that was on the site was demolished. The current land use classification recommends a mix of office and land uses. Though the IMU district permits office and residential uses, it also allows a wide range of more intensive uses such as general industrial and craft industrial. Therefore, the IMU district does not meet the intent of the land use designation. As mentioned, the Fort Sanders neighborhood has experienced a significant increase in residential development due to its proximity, like the hospital, University of Tennessee campus, and downtown Knoxville. Retaining the RN5 zoning district would be appropriate here, as the district permits various housing types and limited non-residential uses that are compatible with a residential environment. Are there any questions?
All right, seeing no questions, we will again move on to number 40.
All right, this is case 5-F25RZ. It is a county rezoning request for a 2.98 acre parcel located on the southeast corner of Level Road and Schaefer Road from neighborhood commercial with conditions to CA general business. The technology overlay zone would be retained. A 2020 recorded plat shows that there are construction and slope easements on the front of the property along Level Road, and near the rear of the property there is a blue line stream with a 50-foot no-build stream buffer. Currently, the subject property has a condition restricting access to Schaefer Road. This condition would be appropriate to retain due to the slope and construction easements at the front of the property, as well as the proximity to nearby access points on Level Road. Staff recommendation is to deny the CA general business zone because it does not meet all of the criteria for a rezoning. The current CN zone has development standards intended to maximize compatibility between adjacent residential uses, such as lighting requirements, landscaping, and pedestrian connections. Though the CA zone would require landscape buffering, Fewer standards are in place to mitigate impacts on neighboring residential uses. Furthermore, the proposed rezoning would permit more intensive commercial uses adjacent to a residential neighborhood and disrupt the established transition in land use intensity between the more intensive zones to the west and residential uses to the east. The existing land use map is shown on the screen, where a visible transition from these commercial and office uses to the residential areas has been established. The site's environmental constraints and proximity to nearby access points could also make the more intensive uses in the CA zone problematic. For these reasons, staff recommendation is to deny the CA general business zone because it does not meet the criteria for rezoning. Are there any questions?
Okay, not seeing any questions, we'll move on, and we're going to do our best to keep us moving. We normally try to get out of here at 1 o'clock, but it's such a long agenda, so we'll just keep moving. Those of you who have to leave at 1 o'clock, totally understand. If you can afford the time to stay, that would be great too. So we'll move on to number 41.
Okay, I'll be brief with this one. This is case 5-I-25RZ. This case was presented at the agenda review meeting in May and was previously postponed to the July meeting. It is a request to rezone a 1.25 acre parcel located at 5420 Shawd Road from agricultural to neighborhood commercial. Staff recommendation is to deny the neighborhood commercial zone because the subject property does not meet the zone's intent or location criteria. The intent of the CN zone is to provide the opportunity to locate limited retail and service uses in a manner convenient to and not yet disruptive to establish residential neighborhoods and should generally be placed at street intersections that include either a collector or arterial street as close to the edge of a neighborhood as possible. The subject property is in the middle of a section of Shawd Road, mainly consisting of residential development and limited civic uses. An approval of the CN zone at this location would be an encroachment of a commercial zone in a primarily residential area. Additionally, access from Shawd Road would be right in, right out only. Due to the untraversable median, traffic from the east would be required to make a U-turn to access the subject property. Unlike the church and elementary school further down the street along Shawd Road, future driveway access would be near the U-turn point, which would not be ideal for higher traffic volumes associated with commercial and retail uses. It is also worth noting that the comprehensive plan has identified other nearby areas along Shawd Road as more appropriate for commercial development, such as the commercial mixed-use corridor to the west and the town center mixed-use place type at the intersection of Johnson Road and Shawd Road to the east. The plan has identified the area between the two place types as more appropriate for residential development and designated SMR and suburban residential. For these reasons, staff is recommending denial of the neighborhood commercial zone. Are there any questions?
One quick question, and I'm asking you to interpret the land use plan, but the fact that the elementary school is there is, as I look at this map and just see the commercial area a bit further away from the elementary school, is that how you would see that land use choice being made in terms of putting more of the less commercial close to the elementary school?
Looking at the plan, it looks like that town center mixed use is kind of abutting the, at least the institutional place type where the elementary school is. So I believe that particular intersection has been identified as more appropriate for commercial development.
All right, seeing no other questions, moving on to 53.
I'll try to be brief in the interest of time, but feel free to stop me at any point if you have questions. So this request is for a dog boarding facility for up to 32 dogs. The property currently accommodates 2 kennels that were built without any permits. In March 2025, the Knox County Courts Administration and Enforcement Department received some noise complaints from an adjacent property owner, and they issued a notice of violence for this property. There are some existing images of the structure that are built. The applicant has noted that they are about 76 feet from the northern property line in this portion and about 36 feet along the eastern property line in this portion, but the image seems to indicate a lesser distance. Here are some quick facts about the acoustic impact on residential property. Sound level in animal shelters can regularly exceed 100 decibel, where 75 decibel is more appropriate when it's next to residential properties. There are no supplementary regulation for animal kennels or dog kennel in the agriculture zone, but there are some standards for commercial kennel in the CA and CP zone. The CA and CP zone requires a minimum of 100 feet setback and a provision for landscaping when it's adjacent to residential properties. Staff think that more longer distance may be appropriate for the agriculture zone. Staff recommends denial of the request because it does not meet the criteria for a use zone review. The noise associated with the use could adversely impact the surrounding residential owners. Commercial uses are not listed as either as primary or secondary uses within the surplus type, indicating that this use is not appropriate. The proposal does not meet the comprehensive plan implementation policy 2 to ensure that development is sensitive to the existing community character. The dog kennels are located along the edge of the subject property next to residential lots, although there are ample space elsewhere within the site. The application has planted some landscaping along the property boundaries. However, the distance from the nearby houses, the materials used in the structures, and the type of landscaping are ineffective for adequate sound attenuation. The staff report describes this in more detail.
Very good. Thank you, Samuel. We will move on to number 10.
Okay, thank you. So this is for 7E 25OA. It's the amendments that pertain to Article 17.3, the City Zoning Code, pertaining to non-conforming lots of record. So I'm not going to read the definition here, but it's up here for you all to look at. But it boils down to is that non-conforming lots of record just inherently do not meet either the lot width or area required by the current zoning of the lot. And the intent of this ordinance is to provide a means for the use of these properties since they don't meet the minimum lot requirements of their base zone. It was never intended to maximize development on a lot, and this ordinance provides more clarification to that fact. Under this proposal, residential non-conforming lots of record will be able to be developed with one single-family dwelling, or if the lot meets the middle housing standards found in Article 4.6, then the non-conforming lot could be developed with one middle housing structure instead. And so we've made a few changes to the subsection A pertaining to use. So currently Article 17.3 allows development of a non-conforming lot of record regardless of the zone, whether it's residential or commercial or office or something of that nature, with lot area and lot width requirements. So these lots could be developed with uses that are permissible by right or special use approval. So we're changing that to where that applies only to a non-residential zoning district. So non-residential districts, they could still be developed for permitted or special use. In residential zoning districts, only one single-family dwelling as a principal use can be constructed, or again, if it meets the middle housing standards, then it could be used for a middle housing type. This is much more generous than zoning ordinances of other cities, our current standards. The city put together a list of municipalities, there's 15 in total, and how they regulate non-conforming uses, or non-conforming lots of record. And so comparatively speaking, ours is much more generous in that it allowed those special uses or any use that's permitted by right. So we're kind of trying to, I guess, button that up a little bit. And keeping a non-conforming lot developable in this way kind of leaves the lot size open to the standards of the zoning code at the time and place, kind of leaves that zoning code into perpetuity when the zoning code is changed over time. So these amendments, again, they're to enable development of the lot, so you don't use the use, but enable that to ensure that it's more compatible with the neighborhood that it's located in. And then finally, under subsection A, there's a new subsection 3, and that's pertaining to that middle use, that middle housing use, and kind of outlining that you can use that if your lot meets those standards. And then subsection B, pertaining to development, that clarifies that development of middle housing on non-conforming lots of record must meet all middle housing standards, including lot width. This is contrasted with the base zoning compliance, which allows development to meet all dimensional standards except those for which the lot is rendered non-conforming. So for example, a 40-foot lot in RN2 would be non-conforming lot of record in the RN2 district. And under Article 17.3.8.2, that new standard we're creating, it would enable the owner to build a single-family dwelling on that lot. However, because the lot did not meet the minimum middle housing standard, it would not be able to develop a middle housing type utilizing 4.6. So it has to meet both. It has to meet the middle housing to use middle housing. And then subsection E, just a housekeeping revision. So we were just replacing the word house with single-family dwelling to make it more consistent with elsewhere in the zoning code. I know I kind of zoomed through that. Really quickly, here's an overview of the research that the city provided into how the other municipalities regulate non-conforming lots of record. Most of the municipalities are in the southern region of the U.S., with a few outliers in the lower Midwest and states closer to Tennessee. 12 of the 15 municipalities allowed only a single-family use. Of the remaining 3, 1 allowed any use except apartments and duplexes, which presumably would also preclude multiplexes or townhouses since they fall within that range intensity. We did pull some data to look at the number of non-conforming lots in the base districts and can compare those with in the middle housing. It's way too much data to be able to present here, but if you're interested in it, we do have that available. So just reach out. Any questions?
Very good. Now, was this in part generated from some of the requests? You were getting requests for variances on non-conforming lots. Is that part of where this came from?
Yeah, there were some, I think are regularly some variance requests associated with that, but a lot of it came out of our research that we did during the middle housing annual report process. And so we recognized that there was sort of a loophole between allowing middle housing and non-conforming lots, but there were other issues with non-conforming lots too. So just cleaning up the whole article while we were at it.
Very good. Thank you. If we could just move on to number 8 then.
Okay, so I'll run through these relatively quickly as well, and if you have questions at any point, just let me know. So the standards, as we know, the middle housing standards have been approved in December 2023 and adopted by council in February 2024. So in that time, we've had 18 months to work through those standards. We've had 63 formal applications, over 60 pre-app meetings, numerous casual phone calls and emails. So the code amendments that are on agenda item 8 are based on extensive collaboration among planning, plans review and inspections, engineering, the law department, both on individual applications received and also on the amendments themselves. The annual report, which is linked on our website, further breaks down the first year of applications, and it'll run through the opportunities to improve as well, and that'll get into some of the basis for the recommended code amendments we're proposing here. And I'll move through these relatively quickly. We have an amendment proposed for the intent section, noting that 4.6, the middle housing standards, may not be combined with standards from the base zoning for principal uses. One or the other apply, they can't be mixed and matched, and that's generally because mixing these standards can result in the maximum intensity allowed by both and create conflicts in zoning review, permitting, and enforcement. We have some proposed revisions to the types. There are minor revisions for clarity in 1 and 2, but the main ones here, overall, the revisions to the types section are based on staff review of multiple applications. So in drafting these code amendments, we started with Opticos's guidance and language for the types more as descriptors, not intending them to be as strict definitions as listed in Article 2.3. However, we've received received a lot of applications that have kind of used that ambiguity in the types to maximize what can fit on a lot. So the intent here is to address the ambiguity, particularly in the triplex and multiplex definitions that allow them to be interpreted as townhouses. So instead of the intent that you can see in the bottom right, these multiplexes, which are like very small multifamily apartment kind of buildings that still kind of fit within that overall streetscape. The ambiguity allowed them to be townhouses with shared sidewalls, so individual units facing the side lots instead of oriented towards the street. So overall, the aim here is just to provide more clarity on the types. We have some revisions to the location criteria saying that middle housing types aren't permitted on flag lots or lots that are accessed by access easements. These are also based on applications that we've seen that have that are not compatible with the neighborhood context. So allowing for a new multi-unit structure without direct frontage or a relationship to the street creates a new development pattern. However, these development of the flag lots is still permitted via the base zoning. So they may still be able to accommodate a duplex through the special use review process. In the significant one in the dimensional standards relates to a conflict between the middle housing and the permitted encroachments, which made it impossible to build an 8-foot deep front porch while meeting the setback requirements of middle housing. So we've made some changes there that allow for someone to build an 8-foot deep front porch, kind of similar to the context, but stay within that front setback pattern of the block. Another significant one, we've reduced the minimum lot widths for duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes to 40 feet for lots with an alley and 45 for lots without an alley. We have received multiple applications for middle housing types that fit on 40 and 45 foot wide lots. They meet the other dimensional standards and they're still compatible with the neighborhood. So we found, that's something that can be accommodated. This also offsets the challenges proposed by removing the potential for administrative variations for lot width, which I'll talk about in a second. And then also there are many non-conforming lots of record that are 40 and 45 feet wide. So these can still be developed using the middle housing standards related to the proposed amendments to the non-conforming lots of record. In the design standards, we've made a clarification about the required building walls, the recess or projection required in side elevations, just to make it a little more clear what we're going for. You can see an illustration of that in elevation and in plan here, but the intent is to avoid flat swaths subsiding with no additional detail, avoid that kind of like default box-like form that's probably easier to build, but is not as compatible with the original buildings in the neighborhood. And then in the last section, we have removed lot width as an allowable administrative variation. So this is an issue that came up in multiple applications where planning staff realized we have pretty insufficient criteria for allowing or disallowing an administrative variation for the lot width. And that created the possibility for our decision-making, staff's decision-making, to be inconsistent and somewhat subjective. So we have removed that possibility. The other side of that is that as the housing types got larger, like the multiplexes on 70 feet wide lots, that 20% is a larger number proportionately to that. So we felt that this was just kind of not in line with the intent of middle housing, so we're proposing to remove that. Another one that is worth mentioning, and I can go further into depth on all these, we have removed the 50% front setback as an allowable administrative variation. This was actually kind of redundant and difficult to achieve because it required them to be, they could be decreased up to 50% if it were consistent with the block face, but the front setback already requires the block face, or the front setback is already required to be the average of the block face, so it already would be consistent. A 50% reduction would contradict that. And then the final one here is delegating the appeals to the Design Review Board, which is a board that already hears applications in the infill housing and the downtown districts. So that includes a high level of detail and it assesses design related to the neighborhood context. So those are the proposed amendments. Oh, and then we have some associated ones. The amendments to Article 9.1 and 10.1 clarify that multiple principal uses on one lot are not permitted using the middle housing standards. So the middle housing standards weren't written with the intent of accommodating the multiple primary structures or uses on one lot. These two articles kind of allowed for a loophole for properties that were zoned RN3 or RN4 that then in turn led to multiple kind of spot rezoning requests. And so staff has just determined that stacking multiple multi-unit buildings on one lot without additional standards isn't aligned with the intent of the middle housing standards. And so we have next up, we'll discuss the standards we have developed for multiple multi-unit buildings on a lot. So in summary, these amendments are informed by analysis of many different applications and then collaboration among multiple departments. And our aim here is just twofold, and I've discussed it in the last agenda review as well, but clarity within the zoning standards, so clearing up discrepancies or conflicts that might be there, and then also generating new middle housing types that are consistent with the neighborhoods. And I can answer questions.
That's a lot of good information. I don't know that there's any questions. If we could move on to number 9 about the cottage courts.
Okay. And so I'll run through this relatively quickly as well, but I would refer you back to the agenda review from the June meeting for a little bit more context. The concept of a cottage court is a group of small detached house scale buildings that are arranged to define a shared court that's open to and visible from the street. So the standards here are proposed for the RN4, 5, and 6 zoning districts. Planning in the city worked with a consultant to develop these standards. And I would just stress here, this is just an option for a new development type, accommodating multiple buildings on one lot. This is not necessarily an end-all be-all solution for new housing. On some of the higher intensity zoned properties, it may not be preferable to multifamily construction on some lots, but it is another tool in the toolbox that some folks might find more appealing within neighborhoods and easier to build. And so the intent here are these organized multi-unit lots that have green spaces, they fit within broader neighborhoods, and they provide both community space but also privacy for the residents instead of kind of stacking multiple buildings on a lot. So we're trying to sort of structure those a little bit more here. I'll run through these kind of with an overview, and then I'll refer you to the case file that has the specific numbers here. The standards start with minimum lot sizes. So they have a width for a one-sided cottage court, which is 75 feet minimum, and 120 feet minimum for a two-sided cottage court, and then 150 feet maximum. The minimum depth of the lot is 100 feet. And then the impervious surface limits of 60% reflect the base zoning requirements, so that wouldn't exceed what's permitted already by the base zoning. It lays out the buildings flanking the court that would be single-family dwellings, and then the building at the end of the court may be a duplex. I'm not going to get into all of the details of the setbacks here. The front setbacks are aligned with the base zone, and then the side and rear setbacks intend to allow for a little more flexibility than the base zoning, recognizing that these are single-story, single-family buildings instead of, say, in the RN6, a multi-story, multifamily building. We have maximum footprints for the building, so these are small footprint houses. They're typically around 500 to 600 square feet. The standards then go through standards laying out the width and depth of the shared court and sort of the minimum size of the court based on the number of dwellings, just kind of ensuring that all of the dwellings face that court and have a relationship to it. There are standards for pedestrian access as well. And then we have standards associated with parking and access. There are required setbacks for the parking lots from property lines, from buildings, and also from the shared court. So it guides the placement of parking that is away from the court and not immediately right on all of the buildings, but also there is some separation from the property lines as well. The parking requirements here are one space per dwelling unit minimum. That's recognizing that these are small footprint, typically one-bedroom units. And we have a driveway width requirement that's based on the street classification. So it would be 10 feet minimum when accessed from a local street and 15 feet minimum when accessed from the larger roads. But city engineering would obviously be involved in the review of the access and parking. And then there are some additional standards associated with these. So there are standards for fencing and low walls, kind of guiding how these units have semi-private or kind of semi-public space fronting the court. There are requirements for porches, stoops, and dooryards. The dooryards are a newer concept where the building has a semi-private space where the facade is set back from the property line and a small area is defined by a low wall or hedge. And then we have some associated standards, adding a definition, shifting 4.7 down to 4.8, and then adding it to the use matrix. So again, that's kind of a lot of information for both of these. If you run back through the case files and you have any questions, feel free to reach out afterwards, but also now too.
Thank you, Lindsay, and not to run it too long, but I did have one quick question about that. I noticed in here that you're recommending this to be in RN4, RN5, and RN6. Was there any thought to adding RN3 to that? It's already medium density is why I was kind of bringing it up.
Yeah, I think that staff thinks that adding RN3 is an option. We'd started with RN4, 5, and 6, kind of similar to the pocket neighborhood standards, and also because the development intensity recommendations would align with our long-range plans, but RN3 could fit within there as well.
I'm just putting it out for discussion. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you.